You're listening to a DM podcast.
Welcome to Over the Back Fence. I'm Di Edwards.
I'm Nicola Dale, and we're buddies of nearly 4 decades. And yes, we actually do happen to share a back fence.
We do. We love parties, people, inspirational stories, and honestly, making the most out of life.
So join us as we open our hearts, share our stories, and hear from some of the most inspirational people in the world, and have a laugh along the way.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Nicola, here we are back in the studio. We love Mondays.
We certainly do.
Yeah, we do. And look, today we are interviewing somebody that, funnily enough, I've been following for a long, long time, who I admire greatly, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Kristin Neff.
We're excited here at the Back Fence.
To Over the Back Fence. She's an associate professor in human development at the University of Texas and has been researching and studying one of my favourite subjects, self-compassion, for miles past a decade. She published the first journal, this is huge. She published the first journal article that defined and examined self-compassion. Go, Kristin. She also created the self-compassion scale, which is used by hundreds of researchers worldwide. She gives lectures on self-compassion internationally and runs workshops. Just lastly, one of your readers stated, and it brought goosebumps from the top of my head to my toes, mindful self-compassion has made me far more resilient. When a storm hits, I float on the surface of the rough sea and wait for it to pass. I've got goosebumps. Rather than thrashing around trying to outswim it. I just think that sums it up in a nutshell. Welcome, Kristin, to Over the Back Fence.
Welcome. Well, Jeb, that is an intro and a half, and I tell you what, well deserved. And what we want to do straight away now is come in, Sam. We've got our beautiful producer here, Sam Thomas, who's an internationally renowned. She's a life coach, but share your story, Sam,
with
please.
Kristin.
With Kristin.
Hi, Kristin. You won't be able to see me, unfortunately.
Pop in.
So I'll just be this voice. I just wanted to say a huge thank you.
There's tears here.
Your work.
Deep breath, deep breath, deep breath. You can do it.
Has really changed my life, and I know not only thousands but millions of people's lives. I first discovered you, I can't remember if it was 2013 or 2014, but it was a Sounds True online summit, I think, that I went to, and you were speaking, and that led me to your work and to your incredible book, Self-Compassion, The Proven Power of Being Kind to Yourself. And it was something that I really wanted to learn at the time. I was really struggling. And I spent years practicing your work, and in 2016 I started teaching it to hundreds of people, and in the end thousands of people, and I have been teaching it for 8 years.
Wow.
And I send people
to
your website every day and use your tools, your self-compassion break, you're treating yourself like a friend, your meditations. I'm constantly telling people about the power of your work, and it's incredibly special to me that I get to be here today in a studio that's interviewing you. It's really wonderful. So thank you for changing my life and the lives of millions of people.
Wow.
Thank you. I mean, it's self-compassion that changes lives. I mean, I don't really, I'm the messenger, but it's the message that really makes a difference. And so I'm so glad you're also spreading that to others. It's wonderful.
Thank you, Sam.
Well, yeah,
that was really special.
Thank you so much. So it is amazing. It's great to hear, and I guess for our listeners to hear, they hear about, Sam, our producer, and, people do know that she's a life coach, but, when we said that you're coming on, it was just like, you are the queen of any guest, and it's so wonderful. But just for some people, a lot of people still going self-compassion. I mean, really, what is it? What is the big sort of raving about it, to be honest?
Yeah, it's one of those things that seems so obvious, and yet we don't do it. I mean, that's the crazy thing. We don't think about it. We don't do it. Our culture doesn't encourage it. I mean, if you just break it down super simply, if you look at the Latin roots of the word compassion, passion means suffer, com means with. How are we with suffering? And normally we think about that. How do we show up for other people when they're struggling or hurting in some way? And most of us try to be, compassionate, kind, supportive, at least to those people that we care about. And yet we don't show up for our own suffering in a helpful way. Usually we're cold to ourselves. We make it worse by judging ourselves or shaming ourselves. So self-compassion is really just very simply turning compassion inward, showing up for ourselves in a kind, supportive, encouraging way when we're distressed or upset, or we're feeling badly about ourselves, or the world's going to hell in a handbasket. How do you show up for yourself? It's very, very simple. And the research is overwhelming, and perhaps not surprising, that when we're supportive with ourselves, we're stronger and we're more resilient.
How are the studies, how is it that it's sort of like, measured? Yes, we're saying with the research, and how is it actually truly measured that by doing that, you do get that result?
Yeah. So, again, self-compassion really sells itself, but I did make some contributions. So one of the things I did was I created a scale to measure it back in 2003. And by the way, there are other scales out there. Mine's not the only one, but, operationally defined it, and I measured it with just very face valid items like, when you're struggling, do you tend to be supportive to yourself? Do you tend to judge yourself? Do you tend to feel all alone? Do you tend to remember, struggles are part of being human? Those types of things. So that's one way to study it. And that kind of got the research ball rolling, so to speak. But there's always a problem with researching anything with self-report scales because, people who score high in self-compassion are less depressed. But how do we know what comes first? Maybe people who are less depressed have score higher in self-compassion, right? So another very common way we do it is through what's called a mood manipulation. You basically have someone, and maybe a group of participants, think about something that's troubling them, and then you put them in a self-compassionate frame of mind. You have them there's three components to self-compassion. We can get into that. You have to be mindful of their struggle, remember that they aren't alone, and then say some words of kindness to themselves. And you compare that to a group where you don't say anything, and if you don't say anything and you have them think about something that's troubling them, usually they're just judging and shaming themselves. And we can really see the huge difference. Whether it's decreasing shame, increasing mood, more motivation, for instance, more motivation to study or to work hard. It's not only linked with better mental health, but also better physical health, because we know it works with our physiology. When we're supportive, our body feels more calm and relaxed. When we're judging ourselves and shaming ourselves, we feel more agitated and anxious. So it's really just a very common sense idea. But for some reason, people just don't intuitively know it. So that's my goal in life, to try to spread the good word.
Isn't it?
Well, spread the kindness.
Yes, yeah.
You mentioned the three core components. Can we break that down and elaborate a little further on it? And I'll just elaborate by saying core components of, I call it SC, self-compassion.
Yeah, so the most obvious component is this idea of being warm, supportive, kind to yourself. In the field of psychology, actually, compassion is often defined as concern with the alleviation of suffering. And so the kindness is this concern, the showing concern for yourself, this desire to help in some way, to support yourself. But there are actually two other elements, according to my model. One is mindfulness. And I actually first learned about self-compassion when I was first learning mindfulness meditation.
Can you tell the listeners what mindfulness is for them, some that don't know what that is? Yeah.
So mindfulness refers to the ability to be aware of what's happening as it's happening, and also to really accept the fact that it is happening instead of like railing against the reality that it's happening. Now, when what's happening is suffering, right? When compassion, when suffering happens, and we show up for our suffering, often we do not want to be mindful of it. We either want to ignore it, pretend it's not there, or we want to fight against it and rail against it. We kind of get lost in it or sucked into the drama of what's happening. So in order to be a good friend to ourselves, think of it this way. If a friend calls you and says, I'm so upset, and you're too busy, you can't take the call, you can't give them compassion. We often don't take our own call. It's crazy, but it's like, I'm too busy, or I can't think about it, or I just got to focus right now. So we aren't mindful of the fact that we're hurting and need some help. Or we do the opposite, which is like we talk right over our friend, or we talk right over ourselves. We actually get so lost in the struggle that we can't even have any space to say, maybe I need a little help right now. So that's why mindfulness is really the foundation of self-compassion. In order to be with ourselves in times of struggle, we need to be mindful of that struggle or those feelings of distress or pain. And then we're kind to ourselves. But then there's also a third element that when I was putting together my model, I didn't realize at first. At first, I just thought, oh, it's mindfulness and kindness. But then I was really struck by this question. What's the difference between compassion and pity? Or between self-compassion and self-pity? Because I knew that self-pity wasn't very helpful. And I was actually reading a Buddhist teacher named Jack Kornfield who talked about the difference between pity and compassion. With pity, there's a sense of separation. We're looking down on others, poor you. Or with self-pity, poor me. Compassion is like, hey, I've been there. Or other people struggle too. This is the human experience. So there's an inherent connectedness, an inherent humanity built into the feeling of compassion for self or others. And that really has to be there. Otherwise, it might become something like self-indulgence or just a pity party, which actually isn't very helpful.
Wow.
That was amazing.
You explained that
you
really.
Shut us up there.
You did. And you did explain that well. And just even sort of to tap in that bit further, because especially for some listeners who go, this is still all kind of new to me. Just if you can sort of go a bit further with, like the difference between a bit of self-pity, a bit of, feeling sorry for yourself, because some compassion will look a bit like, woe is me. I mean, how do you navigate that from going down that path?
That's why, like, for instance, I have people take a self-compassion break, which is you actually bring in the 3 components intentionally. Mindfulness. You just be aware that you're struggling. Just, just become, oh, yeah, that's right, I'm struggling, with some space around it so you aren't, like, lost in it. Okay, so you're struggling. Remind yourself that you aren't alone. And it's, if you don't remind yourself that you aren't alone, first of all, we tend to exaggerate things. Sometimes, not always. Sometimes we belittle it. We don't see things clearly. We either, belittle it or we exaggerate how bad things are, neither of which are clear seeing. But when we feel like it's just us, it's like, not only are we hurting, we feel like there's something wrong with us because we're hurting. We're abnormal. We feel cut off from the rest of humanity. Everyone else in the world is living a normal, perfect life, and it's just me who's struggling, or just me who's made this horrible mistake. And so it's like we're kicking ourselves when we're down, because for human beings, one of the most scary things we can feel is isolated and alone. So compassion, reminds us that, hey, we aren't alone. That, when we are born in this human form, the plan we signed up for was not perfection. The plan we signed up for was to be a mess, to make mistakes, to have struggles. This is actually what makes us human. This is what connects us to others, not what separates us.
It's really healthy to hear that and get sort of reminders of those things.
It's imperative,
isn't it? Because it's sort of like, I think everyone sometimes feels that,
a reboot,
that you are alone. And I think it's a really great thing of simple tools to do for yourself. But what I was saying before is even like that, but how do you do it that you still don't get stuck, that you're going, woe is me?
Well, sometimes you do. I mean, that's natural. You get sucked in and then you go,
Fair enough,
wait a second. That's right. Maybe I'm forgetting other people, and then you correct yourself.
Oh, that's good.
Sometimes we still feel shame. It's not like you sprinkle self-compassion on you and you're perfect. You have no more problems. You're still a human being. You're still going to fall into these same old habits. One of my favorite sayings is, the goal of practice is simply to be a compassionate mess.
Oh, that's good, isn't it?
It's beautiful.
Not the goal is to be a mess, but when the mess of life arises.
That's not an Asian mess, a compassionate mess. I love that.
That's brilliant.
Guaranteed the mess of life will arise. You'll be a mess. Life will be a mess, because that's what human life is. It's messy.
Yeah.
It's also what makes it interesting. So can we bring compassion to that?
You also talk about we are healed by suffering. It's an interesting line, that one, because for the logic in our brains to try and understand what I've got to suffer to be better, that doesn't make sense. But in essence, you've got to, it sounds like the cliche, reach rock bottom before you can start making your way back up the other side. But so tell us about that, being healed by suffering.
Yeah, or sometimes I like to talk about it as, the only way out is through. So when we fight suffering and we don't want it to be there, or we pretend it's not there, or we get so upset that it's there that we make things worse, we can't heal. It's kind of like a wound that never heals because we're trying to fix it all the time, or we don't give it any healing balm, we ignore it. So in order to heal from a wound, we have to kind of accept that the wound is there, and we need to care for ourselves. Ask, what do I need to heal? And so that's really what it's like with any sort of suffering. We need to accept that it's there, right? If we just fight against it, we're usually just going to make it worse. And then, but not only do we accept that it's there, we give ourselves compassion because it hurts. We say we don't give compassion to make the pain go away. It's not a form of resistance or manipulation. I'm going to give myself compassion to make the pain go away. We give ourselves compassion because it hurts, and full acceptance of the fact that this hurts, this is hard, I'm a mess. How can I help? I'm here for you. Those, just like to think of a parent for their child, you just do that naturally with your child. You let your child know, I'm here for you. I'll do whatever I can to help. I may not be able to help, but I'm here for you. I love you. And that's really the most important message you can give to someone you care about. And it's also the most important message we can give ourselves.
Instead of projecting it onto somebody else, own it.
That's true, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people do sort of deflect or blame someone else there, or you numb it, with whatever, and you don't sort of deal with it as well.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of people are afraid that self-compassion means blowing off responsibility.
I hear that a lot. Interesting.
Yes.
Just the opposite. Research shows if you give people, I said one of these mood manipulations, you have people think about something they've done that was harmful to someone else, and you have them write with the 3 components of self-compassion. They are more likely to take responsibility and more likely to want to repair the situation and do something about it. Because it's safe to own up to your mistakes. It's safe take responsibility when you know that saying I made a mistake doesn't mean that I am a mistake.
Oh, that's so good, isn't it? That's so good.
It's not okay to make mistakes and you have to be perfect and you're going to slam yourself with shame and criticism and harshness. If you own up to what you've done, you'd much rather blame someone else.
It's such a great thing for us to know and to hear that and to get those reminders.
It's like the ABCs of life, in my opinion.
Yeah, but it's interesting.
It really is common sense. I mean, I do research, but it's common sense. It's not rocket science.
But we do need to hear it again and again.
We do.
Can you tell us a bit about the fierce self-compassion and sort of like with the yin and the yang and the tender? Can you explain that a little bit more and boundaries?
Yeah. So compassion has 2 sides to it. One is about acceptance and one is about action.
Right.
And so you can call this the yin and the yang, or I like to call it, tender and fierce self-compassion. So tender self-compassion is more of the accepting side. It's really aimed at accepting ourselves and accepting our emotions and accepting kind of, the fact that life is hard sometimes. And it has a warm, nurturing quality, almost like a parental quality when I'm here for you, I care about you, that kind of enveloping ourselves and kindness and care. And this is really the healing quality of self-compassion. But compassion is not just about acceptance. It's really about the desire to alleviate suffering. Sometimes we do that by accepting ourselves and not shaming and blaming ourselves. But sometimes we do it by taking action. For instance, it is not compassionate to accept unfair treatment, or to accept someone walking all over you, or to accept behaviors you're engaging in that are harmful to yourself and others. That's not compassionate. So sometimes the things that we need to take action, drawing boundaries, for instance, a very important act of self-compassion, saying, I would love to help, but no, I need to take care of myself too. Or motivating a change, social justice, fighting for social justice, meeting our own needs. All these things, all these actions are an equally important part of self-compassion. This is why self-compassion makes us strong. We're strong. Joan Halifax likes to say, strong back, soft front. It's both together. It's
that's good, isn't it?
If we're too accepting, too tender, we might get complacent, or we might become doormats. We don't want that. But if we're too much about striving to get it done, or fighting everyone with no sort of acceptance of the messiness of life, well, then that's going to lead to stress and burnout. And actually, I think a lot of our society is in that.
The latter. Yeah.
So we need both. We really need both, and they need to be in balance.
I've just been finishing your book on Audible on self-compassion, and you wrote that a while ago, but a few of the points that shine for me, I think one of the lines was, get curious, not furious.
Yes, that's good.
For the listeners listening, sometimes, you glaze over a bit with this, and I get that. I understand that. I'm absorbing it like my favourite dessert. The other one was, when we feel, we heal.
Yeah.
And honestly, these are such simple, tiny little tools that can sit gently in the mind. And I love the way you do that, because that stays with me. And I've said, what do I say? Like, what we resist, we persist is one of my favourite lines.
Yes, yeah.
But coming back to get curious, not furious. Getting curious is really a buzzword, I find, in the 21st century. Curious can mean a lot of things, but it's awareness and mindfulness. But can you expand on curious for those that wanting to start and break down self-compassion?
Yeah, so the quality of curiosity often goes hand in hand with compassion. All these C's: calm, curious, compassionate. And so the reason curiosity is important is when you aren't curious, it means you're fixed, you're locked in, you aren't open up to other possibilities. So even with regard to ourselves, we might be fixed in thinking I'm a bad person, or fixed in thinking the situation is horrible. There's no flexibility in it.
Right.
And so when we're curious, it means, maybe there's another way to think about this. Maybe there's another way I can perceive the situation. And one of the reasons why it's linked to compassion, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying before about safety. When we're frightened, we aren't curious. We're locked in. Actually, the brain is designed to do this. When we're frightened, we go into fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah.
So we fight ourselves, we flee into a sense of shame and isolation, or we freeze and get stuck. We can't be curious when we're frozen and stuck and scared. But what compassion does is it actually works through the caregiving system, which allows us to feel safe. And that sense of safety allows us to start being curious. Think about it. Once the lion isn't chasing you anymore and you feel calm, is that fresh water over there? Are those berries edible? You need to look at the environment, become curious about it. Maybe I can look at this a different way. That comes partly from the safety that compassion provides us. When you have your own back, and you aren't so frightened, then you can start being a little more curious about the world. And so, for instance, self-compassion, even though by definition is how we relate to suffering, it's actually considered part of the positive psychology movement. It includes things like curiosity and gratitude and awe, because it's actually a positive emotion when we feel connected, when we feel present, when our hearts are open, we're full of kindness. These are positive emotions that lead to other positive emotions like gratitude.
Well, and that's music to our ears, hearing that, because we know we're all about that and we try and sort of promote it and live that way as much as we can. And it was interesting you sort of saying with that fixed mindset, Kristin, because when we were talking to Chip Conley just the other day, he was talking about having that growth.
He adores you, by the way.
He does, yes, yeah. Like everyone else,
True.
But
Including our producer.
Saying to a kind of a similar thing, a bit like with that, having that growth mindset.
Yes.
So it's sort of a thing, I guess, kind of be a bit similar that way than being sort of stuck, like you can be say grumpy old men or old women going, this is the way it's going to be. Whereas really,
habitual.
If you've got a different mindset, if you stay curious and have a growth
curious
mindset.
is to me, do you conjure up the image of childlike sort of fun? Like, wow, rather than, something, A to Z and academic. It's sort of childlike to me.
It is.
Curious.
And creates a bit of space as well too, and for me it can maybe possibly
That's a good
calm
point.
things down a bit, because you're
Calm
saying
you say.
calm the farm, and I've been put my hand up to being the past reactive and things like that, because I'm a bit hyper. Surprise, surprise. But I love hearing this and learning.
And something, Nicola and I wanted to know, it's such a basic thing. Remember we were talking about self-love versus self-compassion.
Yes.
Is there a difference?
Yeah. I think
Good
a lot of
question.
it
I think
depends.
it was your original.
Oh, good.
Well, it depends how you define self-love, right?
Yeah.
I don't use the word because you could think of a narcissist as having self-love.
Right.
Yes, true.
But if people, that's not really self-love. Okay, well, then what do you mean by love? So the reason I don't use the word self-love, you might say that self-love is part of the self-kindness. Some people call it loving kindness. There's a loving quality to the kindness and warmth we show ourselves. But again, if you don't have the sense of connectedness to others, that self-love may not include other people.
Now that's interesting.
Isn't it? That's
So
true.
it's separate
Wow.
and isolated, that it maybe not necessarily so healthy. And also, is it mindful? Is there some wisdom in it? Or is it just kind of like, oh, I'm the best thing in the world.
I'm the greatest.
Yeah. And that's really good to bring that up.
No, it's making sense.
Yeah.
Again, nothing wrong with the term. It's just a little less specific. Same thing with self-care. I mean, self-care is wonderful. Usually people think about like, behavioral self-care, taking time for yourself, eating well. Great, no problem. But so you can't always like get a massage when you're in a really stressful situation. And it doesn't necessarily refer to how you deal with your emotions. And again, it doesn't necessarily include this shared humanity. The reason the shared humanity is so important is there's actually not a lot of self in self-compassion. Even though the word is self-compassion, my friend Dan Siegel, he hates the word self. And I said, don't worry, you can call it inner compassion. You don't even have to use the word self. Because what's happening is when we're suffering, when we feel frightened, when we feel inadequate, our sense of self is really, really strong. It's rigid. It's, salient. But when we're feeling compassion, think about when you have compassion for your friend or your pet. You aren't thinking about yourself. You're just in this state of kind of loving, connected presence. Same thing happens with self-compassion. We stop being the self that's hurt and needing care, and we start being the compassionate presence from which our self-compassion is flowing. And when we do that, we're kind of letting go of our sense of separation from other people and from the world at large. This is kind of more of a spiritual dimension of self-compassion.
I love that spiritual side.
It really allows us to feel connected to a larger whole.
And isn't that what it's all about, really, is connection too? Like I think so with everything is saying combating loneliness, combating a whole lot of things there too, is it's just really important to have that and to have that connection and to feel heard and to be heard and, to listen and to have all those skills. It's just really...
It's essential.
It is.
So if someone's listening right now and they've been listening to you and they're going, oh, God, I am taking that out on my husband, my friend, my son, often with children, and they're going, but, and it's like a quagmire in their mind right now, where do I begin? I'm sure there's a song around that.
But I love some little sing along.
Where do I begin to tell the story? So,
do you like to sing, Kristin? Because she's always invites
my
the guest.
happiest thing to do in the world.
I have too much compassion for you.
That was a great comeback. I love that.
Oh, that's
that was very well said.
That is gold.
So I know it's very broad and it's a lot of inner work and whatever, but can you initiate something for a listener?
Yeah. Well, so you want to start where the pain is. It's actually quite simple. So, in other words, instead of like trying to figure out where do I start, what do I have compassion for? How are you hurting right now in the moment? Maybe I'm hurting because I feel I can't practice self-compassion. It feels like way too much. I feel stuck.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, can you let yourself have some kindness, be moved by that? It must be hard to feel stuck. Kind of acknowledge that with mindfulness, the fact that it's difficult, whatever it is you're feeling, remember that you aren't alone. It's actually really hard for everyone. Most people, especially now in today's crazy world, it's always been crazy, but it seems especially crazy now. People are stressed, people are feeling isolated, people are overworked, people are burned out. It's a lot to take on. Our brains, by the way, aren't really designed to be self-compassionate. That's the one reason you should have compassion for yourself. Our brains are actually designed to be compassionate for others. With ourselves, when we're threatened, they're designed to be like fight, flight, or freeze. That's what feels more natural. So that's why it doesn't come as naturally. So, don't judge yourself and just start where you are. Start with the confusion. Start with the not knowing where to start. Oh, well, what if you had a friend who said, oh, I'm just so upset, I don't know where to start? You'd probably say, okay, let's just take it one step at a time. I'm here for you.
So you're saying be present. Is this what you're saying?
Be present with whatever's happening.
Oh, that's so good.
Open your heart to whatever is happening.
So how do you open your heart, though? Like, if I said to someone, open your heart, what does that look like?
So there's a lot of, I know that sounds vague, so there's some concrete ways. So actually, one really easy way is kind of a little hack, if you want, is through physical touch. Because again,
I love this.
Yeah. So babies are designed to interpret soothing, caring touch as a signal of compassion, right? Well before they learn how to talk. So, and there's research that shows putting your hand on your heart creates the same physiological response as if someone else puts their hand on your shoulder. Our body doesn't really know the difference. So compassion, care is part of it. Because we're mammals, this is a natural system. But again, it evolved for others, but our body doesn't know the difference. So if we use touch, put our hands on our heart or our face, or give ourselves a hug, and actually
give yourself a hug, like an actual hug.
You can
Well,
give
doesn't
yourself
that
a hug.
feels good,
It
though.
actually
I-
lowers-
Everybody
it
listening.
lowers your
I love that.
cortisol,
Yeah.
activates your sympathetic nervous system.
And you're the
changes
proof. That's a
reality.
fact. They've proven that.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of research.
Okay,
on
guys,
this.
you listening to
That's-
that?
That's a good hack.
Yeah.
You start with physical touch.
Yeah.
And then there's 3 ways you might think of easy ways to give yourself compassion. You could either, sometimes you just give compassion to yourself. Maybe you feel just able to say, oh, be kind to myself. But maybe that's too hard. You could imagine giving compassion to a friend or a loved one. What would I say to my friend if they were in the exact same situation I'm in?
Right.
You could then turn it around, do a U-turn. Or you could also imagine, what would a really compassionate person say to me right now?
Oh, that's a
Maybe
good
you
one.
have a friend, or maybe it's a spiritual figure. Maybe you're religious, there's a spiritual figure, or maybe, a public figure, or maybe your grandparents, or, someone. We usually have some Obi-Wan Kenobi, maybe some movie. You know what compassion sounds like and feels like. So you can imagine someone else compassionate. What would they say to you right now?
Oh, they're brilliant, simple
just
tools.
washed over
and I
me.
think, as you were saying,
That's the
awareness.
thing. We know what compassion sounds like and feels like. Some of us have had the privilege of having more compassion in our lives than others. But even those who come from really horrible histories, did not have a loving family, usually there's some relationship, often like with a pet. Actually, often having a pet that we care for is like this very easy, uncomplicated, loving relationship. What would you say to your pet?
I love you, Fred.
Or your pet who loves you, they talk, what would they say to you?
Yeah.
It's really, it's not that it's difficult in the sense of like having to know how to do it. What's difficult is remembering to do it, because our culture doesn't tell us we should.
It doesn't nurture it.
And I think that's you're doing the good work by spreading the word.
Our body doesn't feel totally natural to our body. I'm just going to say it. That's the way it is. So, but it can be gotten over. It's not that difficult to treat your body like you would treat someone else. It reacts the same way.
You're doing such a great job of spreading the word. We've had Dr. Ginny Mansberg, who's specialised sort of in menopause and female health, and she was straight away talking about you, and just like, through the thing there.
There
we
you go,
sort of-
Kristen, you talked about
But
it.
with
How
just,
did you know I would be a better
but she was quoting it, and just ways of, when we're asking about how do you, when you're feeling low and you're feeling terrible and you're going through menopause, which so many people are, and now we know it's the subject that everyone's talking about, and it can go on for decades, but it is sort of sometimes that simple thing. Don't forget it. Self-compassion.
It's amazing how the immediate difference it makes. So when you're having that difficult physical sensation or emotion or troubling thought, just hold that pain in whatever form it takes. But it doesn't have to be big pain, even if it's small pain. Just hold it in these 3 elements. Be mindful of it. Remember, okay, this hurts. Be aware of it. Remember that you aren't alone. Give yourself some kindness because of it. And when you do that, immediately you feel stronger and more able to cope. It won't magically make the pain go away, but it'll give you more strength to be able to hold what's happening so that you can get through it. And if you're a good friend to yourself, it's going to help. Of course it is.
That, in essence, leads directly into what I'm about to say. Is I remember reading about self-compassion. The beauty in it is not just for your own self-compassion. It helps humanity, because self-compassion is all about being part of this vast world and feeling for the world, and therefore you enact to do something to try and help the world. So it's a great gift.
Even more than that is true. So the more self-compassion we have, the more compassion we can have for others, the less likely to burn out. But also, going back to, I'm a science nerd, the way that
we love science nerds.
Emotional resonance. The human brain is designed to feel the emotions of others. We've got specialized neurons to do this. Whole portions of the brain are designed to feel what other people feel. So when you're around someone who's happy and like they're smiling and laughing, you kind of feel happy and smiling and laughing. And if you're around someone who's like, sad or depressed or tense, you feel that tension. That's the way the human brain works. So when you're going around shaming yourself, feeling like, I'm such a sad sack or just horrible, then that's the mindset that everyone you meet is kind of resonating with this. And it's pre-verbal. It doesn't happen through language. We can just feel other people's emotions. If you're filled with warmth and kind of a calm and an acceptance, well, I'm a mess, but I'm a compassionate mess. You're actually giving the gift of that compassion to everyone you meet. Your children will benefit. Your significant others will benefit in your life.
Your pets.
You're a more compassionate presence in the world.
Yeah, well, we can all be a bit of a mess, and it's it's a-okay.
Yeah. No, it's
I'm
true.
not okay. You're not okay. That's okay.
Can I ask a question just with Sam, who's our beautiful life coach here? How are you feeling, Sam, with sort of listening to this? And how do you find when you teach, Kristin's work? Can you explain a little bit now, just coming back, circling to you?
Yeah. I mean, I love teaching your work. I'd be really interested, Kristin, one of the things that I often get, and I guess it's because I'm coaching people, is a lot of people have a belief that what keeps them motivated, what keeps them pursuing goals and things like that is this kind of critical voice. And they think that if they're self-compassionate, that they're going to let themselves off the hook, they're going to become lazy, they're just going to kind of not do anything because that feels too gentle to them. And so I would be really interested in how you, I guess, help people that think that they need that criticism to succeed.
Yeah, well, I was actually going to say that even earlier. I always mention that because research shows it is the number one block to self-compassion cross-culturally.
Well,
because self-criticism kind of works. It kind of works as a motivator. Just as using harsh criticism for our children to get them to do what we want, it kind of works. You can get a child to do what you want if you call them names and, put the fear, whatever into them. They'll kind of pay attention and do what you want. So it kind of works. Spare the rod, spoil the child. We do that with ourselves. But what we know now in developmental psychology, certainly, and now in psychology, self-psychology as well, a much more effective way to motivate someone is through encouragement and support. Because when you use fear, really self-criticism, you're using fear to motivate yourself. I better get it done, otherwise I'm going to be a horrible person and life's going to come to an end. The problem with that approach, even though it does get you to pay attention, is it causes performance anxiety, which directly works against your ability to perform at your best. It prevents you from getting in a flow state because you're thinking so much about things, which prevents you from working at your best. And also, this is really key, it prevents you from learning from your mistakes. Because when you make a mistake, you're so busy slamming yourself and shaming yourself and judging yourself that you have no mental space to say, maybe I could do better next time if I did that differently.
Wow, that's great.
That's brilliant.
And so what self-compassion does is so we acknowledge our mistakes. We say, just because I made a mistake doesn't mean I'm a mistake. It happens. It's human. What can I learn from this? Right? It's okay. And that sense of safety actually reduces the performance anxiety, increases self-confidence because you know you have your own back, and it increases performance. A lot of research. We just published a study with college-level athletes showing that teaching them self-compassion improved their game, improved their athletic performance.
That's excellent to hear.
So that's amazing.
Wow.
Sam's got the biggest smile going, yes. So you're teaching the right word.
So that's a great thing.
Yeah, you can find that study on my website if you want to read it.
And look, more parents need to learn more wisdom around SC, self-compassion, because ultimately, she was saying, that flows through their children and they take that through life rather than criticize. There's ways to reword things rather than, you can't do that, you do that wrong, you're not good enough. Like, look, maybe you could do that better, or just think about your words to your kids at night.
Really, is it being now taught in schools now, this sort of work as well, like sort of even from young children as well? Because it's such a great tool to have from a young age,
Well, I mean, I think certainly towards others, teachers, modern day teachers are taught about using support and encouragement and not making a child's self-worth contingent on the outcome, like letting them know that it's really about making their best effort, giving them the tools they need to succeed to achieve their best. In terms of self-compassion, it's making some inroads. It's a lot better than it was 20 years ago. Yeah, over 20 years ago now when I published the first study. It's more in the zeitgeist. I think certainly most therapists now know about self-compassion.
You must be, without sort of blowing your own trumpet, but seriously, you must be damn proud of yourself because really you are the queen and you're the one that really...
There are Paul Gilbert in the UK. There's a lot of other people who worked on
caught on the bandwagon.
My role.
But I think you're the original, right?
Trailblazer.
Yeah.
I didn't invent the idea.
Own it. You did.
Well, you're our poster girl, and you know what? All the back fences, we're going to blow your trumpet. We've got you on.
Practicing old truths, but yeah, I feel good.
You know what you are to me? You're an island of calm. That's how I feel being in your presence.
Except when I'm not.
Yeah, well, I'll run. No, I'm going to joke. I think people that are compassionate give off, it's like there's an energy you feel before they even speak. You know, you can sense a compassionate person walk into the room. I do. I go, I could share my life with that person. But you know what I mean? It actually emanates. It actually flows through the energy of who and what you are.
Yeah, well, I would say, on a good day. But yeah,
Every day's a good day.
I mean, I love that term, compassionate mess. You can use it because you could do it.
Yeah.
Look, you've really made it simple now. You've made it
You're
simple.
a compassionate mess.
Yeah.
You are helping every single. First of all, you give them permission to be a compassionate mess.
I love it.
You know, we can learn from our messes and grow. We don't have to get it right. We just have to keep trying, doing our best.
Incredible.
You know, and of course, we actually end up doing better if we take that approach. It changes your physiology. It changes your demeanor. It changes the. I'm going to sound unscientific, but the energy you put out there in the world, and people feel it through their mirror neurons. So absolutely, it's such a gift to give to everyone in your life, including yourself.
Oh, that's beautiful. We're all about energy, and we've got a couple of our signature questions for you.
And
Kristin.
don't forget that Kristin's website, there's lots of things that people
it's
can...
selfcompassion.org.
Did you hear that, guys? Can you just repeat that, Sam? Just someone's into this now. I know we'll put it in our notes. Selfcompassion.org.
Selfcompassion.org.
Right.
If you could share a back fence with anybody on planet Earth, who would it be and why, Kristin?
Okay, well, so just right now,
Yeah.
I would love Kamala. I just thought
I knew
Kamala
it.
Harris.
I knew you should say that. I knew it.
I am a fan. She embodies fear.
I knew it.
She is strong. She's compassionate. She's wise.
Fierce.
Well, what did Chip Conley say too? I think there's a
What
few
did he
fans
say?
too.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
they
he
were
did
talking
say.
about
Right
it.
now, because I just watched her give a great speech, I would love to be able to meet her.
Oh,
Actually,
wow.
she's on Brene Brown's podcast. I'm having a little bit of envy.
Okay, well,
Is that true?
Well,
Yeah, I didn't know that.
We might get
Wow.
them all on ours too. You know, even Trumpy.
Yeah, we like to sit on the fence. Here's the last one, and it's quite simple, but I'd like to have a little minute to think about this one because I'm dying to hear how you answer it. What makes you happy, Kristin?
What makes me happy?
Take a second.
Yeah.
I'll do the music.
Let's just sing along.
What is it?
What song is in your
You
mind
don't
now?
always get what you want. You get what you need.
Kristin get what she wants. She's created a lot of things. She can create whatever she wants.
That's the interlude music.
Yeah. So, so this is a question I actually have taken very seriously today. Really finding happiness not in circumstances, not finding my happiness in what's happening, but basically how I'm just being. When I allow myself to kind of disentangle from my thoughts and emotions and perceptions and just rest in being, and I feel my connectedness with everything and my heart's open, that's where happiness is. And the beauty of that is I can always go there, even in really difficult moments. I've gone through some, I've gone through some pretty difficult things in my life. And I've learned that when you stop identifying with what's happening and you just become the loving awareness in which what's happening is arising, that's where peace and happiness is. It's like I sometimes think I'm looking for love in the wrong place if I'm looking for it outside of me. It's really just in the nature of our being itself, that's the good news.
Oh, that's
I
good
love that.
news.
Can you give our love to your son, Rowan,
Yes.
please?
How old is he now?
I was going to say him. He was my
Yeah.
second choice.
I was all right. It's through there. You go.
How old is Rowan?
So Rowan is 22, and
he's-
he's driving, and he graduated with 2 years of community college, and he's doing great.
I
And
loved
he
his
is-
documentary
he has-
years
he has
ago.
such shining light. He just makes people happy. He just has this joy about him. It's just, I can't take credit. He was like that when he came out of the womb.
Well, you've certainly had a joy.
Send our love from Australia,
Exactly.
will you? To
You know,
him?
you've added a lot of joy for us and a lot of tools and tips, and it's really kind of fairly simple hearing these really important tools. So thank you so much.
Loved every second of
We've
this.
loved it all.
Yeah.
And so everyone, don't forget to rate and review. I think this one is going to go off the Richter, really. So share with your friends. Tell people about it. You know, like really share it. And we always like the ratings. And Tony, what would you give?
I have to do 1111, the angel.
The angel.
Because,
another angel.
yeah, Kristin,
around us.
just as I said, you're an island of calm. And if we can, thank you for sharing that with all of us, and let's spread the calm and the love.
Sam can have the final word in this one
bless.
to everybody.
It's just, a final thank you. And to anyone that is listening that, has never tried this before, I just encourage you to try it because it'll change your life. Kindness always wins.
Oh,
Yeah, there you go. Whoa.
thank you, Kristin.
Thank you so much.
Bless you. Bless you.